Hello, Yoichi. How are you?
Well, I'm doing all right. It's been another tough week.
Yep,
More cover-ups, more
yep,
bad news down the line.
yep, yep. Well, they finally done the obvious and elevated the catastrophe to level 7, which they should have done long
Yeah,
ago.
a couple of weeks late.
Yeah,
It's probably beyond the 7 by now. I don't know if there's a 8 rating. They seem to jack it up by 2 points per time. So
it's
they're
it's.
approaching the Big Ten mark there. Yeah.
I agree. I completely. It's surpassed Chernobyl in my opinion, without any question.
Oh yeah, sure, sure, absolutely. The
Then
total number radiation release is just months.
right,
Yeah.
the drone that flew over the Fukushima 1 facility the other day showed quite
Mhm.
clearly, according to people over here, that there is
Mhm.
no spent fuel pool remaining in Building 3. It was blown to smithereens. It's gone. Nothing there.
Yeah, that's a vast amount. I mean, we're talking about something like, I believe there's something like 1,500 fuel rods inside each of the pools inside these buildings.
It's not good. Now, the enlarging of the exclusion or evacuation zone is just too little too late for a lot of people, most likely. Uh,
Right, right.
what's your
Yeah, yeah,
take
yeah. The
on?
distance is something like, say, well, it's actually not a clear circle. So we're talking about 12 miles to something like 18 miles. Uh, far from far from that. Takashi Morizumi, who's leading the reporting teams, he's been back up there a third time for the recovery of bodies from Soma, the beach areas where it's irradiated. He's indicating that even 40 kilometers out, they're getting maximum dosages. So
Wow,
this is
wow.
far from adequate. The people there basically are being we're left as sacrificial victims basically for the for this whole cover up by TEPCO and the economic ministry.
It's uh, it's a worldwide catastrophe. This this
Hmm.
this trash is going to get into the food chain. Already is.
Yes,
It is already in American drinking water, in
that's right.
American dairy products. Have you been seeing the
Hmm.
stories? These are not insignificant amounts. The government, of course, has trouble keeping its lies straight over here. Uh,
Hmm.
the FDA says 4,700 is the acceptable level for iodine, radioactive iodine in food. The
Right.
EPA says 3 picocuries is acceptable.
Hmm.
So they're not even
Hmm.
close.
No, 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 no. So yeah, yeah, they do raise the dosages ratings whenever there's a leak, and it's sort of a rubber band sort of a measure. So and it's always about cumulative effect. It means sure, single exposure, yeah, you can take a lot, but we're talking about year after year. How many liters of milk do you drink a year, or especially for children? And I think this is a real problem. Is that we're seeing we're well past the second pass of the radiation around the
Right.
atmosphere. So we're seeing the buildup, steadily, week by week, it's going to build up. The other
And
problem is, of course, the seawater problem, which is just,
yeah.
uh, absolutely crazy the way the IAEA is, the International Atomic Energy
Uh-huh.
Agency, is just washing its hands of this whole
They are
episode.
that's they're absolutely doing that. This let's talk about the seawater for a minute. We know that
Hmm.
13,500 tons of radioactive water was and is being dumped into the ocean. This has really infuriated the Chinese and the
Right,
Koreans, which call the handling of the situation by Japan incompetent, and probably a lot worse than that. No one is
right.
happy about this. The
Right.
amount of
Well, you have to
water.
understand that the highly radioactive water, something like 7 million times normal level, was detected off the coast of northern Iwate. So
Yes.
what we're seeing is a northeasterly drift, cyclical drift of what's called the black current, of the Kuroshio in Japanese. This is
Okay,
that
let's go
warm
into
current
this in
that
detail. This
sweeps.
is very important, please.
Yeah, this current sweeps up from the south, and then it passes Kamchatka Peninsula, goes past the Bering Strait, where it mixes a lot with Arctic water, and then it comes past the coast of Alaska, down the west coast of Canada and United States, and finally ends somewhere off of Mexico. So the problem here with this is that one, it's one of the richest fishing areas in the world. This is where all the water's mixed. So this is why the Chinese and Koreans are so upset. They have fishing trawlers up there, and then this radiation is coming right into their best fishing areas. The second problem is that, the IAEA says that, well, the radiation is not a threat because it's going to mix with seawater in the Pacific. Well, that's not exactly the case because it's trapped basically in this conveyor belt, something like the Gulf Stream on the East Coast comes around. So it's not mixing with vast volumes of Pacific water. In fact, it's a steady stream of radiation that's coming around in a clockwise circle in the narrow band. And what we're seeing happening here is just passing the greatest concentration of large sea mammals in the world. We're talking about seals, mammals, whales, so basically these are the animals at the top of the food chain, and the radiation is going to collect through the fish right up the food chain into these sea mammals. So this is really a very serious problem. Could lead to the largest extinction of mammals since maybe the Stone Age.
Wow. Think about that current called the black current appropriately, arcing up across past Kamchatka into the Bering Sea, the Aleutians,
Bering Straits. Between Russia
and then the Gulf of Alaska, all the fishing, it could wipe it out. Look, folks, this is we couldn't even put a price tag on the potential damages here. It would be incalculable.
Yeah, this is like major ecological catastrophe that's going to just, be with us for a century if this goes on. I think this is, and we're talking about leakage is going to go on for years the way they're going.
Well,
I think the other danger is why did they release so much seawater now that's so dangerous? Is because they're going to replace it for even more higher levels of radioactive water.
I was just going to mention that. The 13,500 tons that they are pumping or have pumped into the ocean to make way for another big batch of highly probably plutonium-laced water. They're not saying.
Yeah, exactly what I'm thinking is why would they release this highly radioactive water now? This is obviously for reactor 2, which has been showing a lot of problems.
Yeah. Now the other thing is, TEPCO has admitted, and whatever TEPCO admits, you could probably double or treble. They've admitted to 50,000 tons of this higher grade radioactive water on the grounds, under the buildings, in the concrete vaults where the pipes go and everything else. 50,000 tons, that's what they've admitted to. And they're going to put it in a tank that holds 13,000? I don't think so.
Put to the tanks. And this is massively concentrated water. So, and they don't have that much storage capacity in these tanks. So some of it eventually has to be released.
No, they're going to have to bring a super tanker over there.
You can't put it in an oil tanker. There's just, there's nowhere to go.
Well, they probably will end up proposing a super tanker at some point, I bet, because they've got no ground storage.
Where is that going to go?
That's right. That's right.
This is a shell game, and in the end, we have finite places to store the stuff, and there's no way to dispose of it.
They haven't got the storage potential to do it now. When Fuel Pool 3 was blown to smithereens in that tremendous explosion, it looked like a small atomic bomb, by the way, if those of you remember, that went up into the air. The particles were probably ranged in virtually every size you could imagine. Something you could hold in your hand, something down to a nanoparticle, which went up into the atmosphere. These were plutonium, folks. And they have cesium now in the milk in Vermont. But they're not talking about testing dairies all over the country. They talk about one or two here and there.
I mean, just basically shut down animal rearing in the United States and all the wildlife, too. They're basically going to be finished. So this is... there's got to be an end to it. TEPCO and the Ministry of Economy, the IEA, are still like ostriches in the head. They still don't want to entomb these reactors, and I don't know what they're waiting for. They keep them cool. What are they waiting for? The time has come. It has come a long time ago.
Well, the largest transport aircraft in the world, the Antonov 225, I believe, that the Russians own and developed, flew into, I think it's L.A., to pick up this pumper truck they're taking over there, which has booms which are almost 300 feet or something like that they can reach out with. But they're going to do the same
Right.
thing. They're going to be just pouring water, more water into these plants, creating
Right.
more
Right. Well, actually,
radioactive
that's
water.
kind of secret preparation. That's very quiet preparation from entombment. This is what they're going to use to pour whatever they're going to shield the reactors with. One of the things they're looking at is sodium silicate, which is a water glass.
Yeah.
This is that did stop the leakage in that one trench. And
Right.
I think that is something they may be looking at as, you know, one of the problems you raised was the problem of concrete being very brittle, cracking, that this sodium silicate water glass might be used somehow. I don't know how they'll contain it, but they're looking at that right
How
now.
are they going to contain something that's melted down through the containment building, through the concrete, and into the ground?
That's a real problem. The underground stuff is really
There's nobody's going to dig down there to get to
it
that.
will break through, and it's very difficult to, plug. They can't plug all the leaks.
We could have a major explosion at any time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Correct?
that's right. That's right. Because we're seeing, like with the 7.0 earthquake, which was underreported. I think the international media said it was a 6.3. It was clearly between the 7.0 and the 7.1. That knocked out the power supply for about an hour, shut down the pumps. We're still seeing aftershocks that would, in any other case, be a major earthquake anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Hitting the place and knocking out all power systems and temporarily knocking out equipment. Started a fire, also went in a battery box. So, we're not out of the woods by any means.
I don't call this
boiling away.
Right. I don't call them aftershocks. I call them earthquakes. I don't like
they're
that
major,
idea.
They're major quakes of themselves. As the whole plate, all the tectonics there are working themselves out. Pressure is just moving from one point to the other. Yeah.
I heard it shifted down to closer to Tokyo. When you've got a movement one place,
it seems to be moving closer. As pressure relieves from one point, it passes it on to the next point along the fault line or to another fault. And so it is a series of major quakes that's going on.
There are 4 different plates that intersect and juncture under the islands of Japan. It's quite amazing. And there are 6,800 islands total, and I think 97% of the landmass is concentrated on 3 of the islands, and so it's quite an active, quite a diverse geology there. It's amazing. But back to Europe just for a minute. This document in Europe now released to the public advises against consuming any rainwater and says vulnerable groups such as children and pregnant or breastfeeding women should avoid consuming vegetables with large leaves, fresh milk, and creamy cheese. Now that's saying
sort of
don't eat it.
Sort of basic vitamin list there, doesn't it?
Yes, and they're saying don't eat it.
Yeah, and what's left? I mean, the question is, what can you eat anymore?
We're getting close to that. Now, remember, folks, this is Europe. This isn't the west coast of America. This isn't Japan.
They're being a little more forthright and honest in Europe about the risks. And, they've been through Chernobyl over there. They know what they're talking about. And, I think the media also talks a lot about how the Japanese are panicked. Well, the Japanese are not panicked. They know more about radiation than any other country in the world. I mean, we've had radiation studies of victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah, all bets are off on this one, folks. Anything goes. You're totally right. I'm sorry to hear the Asian media is beginning to quiet down. The story has literally disappeared from Google and CNN here most of the time. It's just not there.
Right.
Not there.
Well, the basic thing that they're pushing from what we can detect from all these media sources is that the message that is coming out is that nuclear is still, despite this crisis, is still the only clean green energy out
please.
there. And we have no choice but to rely on nuclear. This is the message that they're coming out with.
There is nothing green about nuclear energy. Nothing. Right. It's the antithesis of green. It is probably quite capable of, as you mentioned, the first major extinction event in a long, long time. And I don't know how long it takes for this radiation exposure to come home. People say 2 years, 3 years, but I predict we're going to be seeing it amongst the Japanese people.
It's continuing. I mean, as you pointed out earlier, Chernobyl is broken open again. So the Chernobyl crisis is not history. It's still with us.
Yeah.
I think this is the problem. It never goes away. Other power systems, they shut down. But nuclear just keeps heating away, keeps irradiating us. It doesn't stop. And I think this is a problem that is going to be dogging the next generation too, not just ours. As I look at this matter more, nuclear energy is no longer a science. When we look at the way the IEA is reacting, it's clear that it's the priesthood of a false cult, of a false religion, a god that has failed, a nuclear god. And I think for the rest of us, we've got to take a hard look at that. We just cannot believe anymore. We've got to stop believing, take their temple apart. I mean, these people are as cruel and cynical as the Aztec witch doctors that used to cut people's heart out. We've got to look at them. We cannot allow these globalist people to be running the world anymore. I mean, look at what they're doing. They're on a death wish. They're in denial. They have no right to govern this planet any longer.